Good evening. I think we'll get underway. My name is May Gerstel, and I want to welcome all of you to the second to the last election forum. This evening, you're going to see and hear from two candidates, the two finalists for the Seattle City Council, as well as the two finalists for our legislative district, the 43rd Legislative District. So, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Ned Lang, who is our moderator this evening.
Thank you, May.
Oh, I took your mic.
Can't forget these things. Thank you, May, very much. We have the two forums tonight, as May indicated, and we're going to start tonight with the Position 8 Seattle City Council. The candidates have been advised of the ground rules. Each will open with a 3-minute opening statement, and we've asked them to answer this question. Why are you a candidate for this office? What unique quality or experience do you possess that makes you the best candidate, and what will your emphasis and goals be? They will then have, after the opening statements, we will have questions and answers. Each speaker will have a minute to respond to the question. It's not a debate. They won't have rebuttal, but they can make any responses they wish in their closing statements, which will be after the question and answer session. And each speaker will have 2 minutes for their closing statement. When we're through with the City Council, we will proceed to the legislature. Our two candidates for the City Council position are on my left, Alexis Mercedes Rink, and on my right, Tanya Wu. The first speaker tonight will be Alexis, and she will have her 3-minute opening statement. She can stand or you can sit here. I recommend standing because people see you and speak directly into these things.
I think we got it. Okay, fabulous. Okay, I will stand because I'm very, very short. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I'm a renter and somebody who gets by and goes to work on our buses. I went from waiting tables next to the Space Needle to working on policy at the UW Tower, and now I'm running for Seattle City Council to fight for a city that works for all of us, and not just the ultra-wealthy few. And in my career, I've built a reputation for bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. After getting my master's degree at the UW, I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations on housing and health of our communities. And most recently, I was working at the UW as the Assistant Director of Policy Planning and State Operations within UW's budget office, supporting the university in the administration and communication of their $10 billion budget. And I was brought to this work because of my upbringing. I'm very proudly raised by my grandparents, and that's due to the fact that I was born to teenagers who were caught in the cycles of gang violence, homelessness, substance use disorder, and prison. If it wasn't for my grandparents, I would have gone to the foster care system. But I got a chance to grow up in a resourced community. I got a chance to grow up with resources around me in good schools, in good public schools, with great teachers who saw me. I spent my afternoons at the Boys and Girls Club. I got to be a Girl Scout, and I'm here today as a living testament to when we invest in young people, regardless of their beginnings, we can change generations. My birth dad's alive today because of a transitional housing program. So we need to protect those investments. In the wake of our city's budget crisis, we need to take steps to pursue progressive revenue and ensure that corporations and the ultra-wealthy pay their fair share so we can keep our libraries open, so we can expand our transit system, build the housing we know we need, and keep our communities safe. division is everywhere, but this is the campaign that is uniting Seattle. This is the campaign that has brought together the entire Democratic Party, has brought together advocates, has brought together unions, and most importantly, the majority of voters made it clear in August who they trust to ensure that we carry forward a strong vision for the future of Seattle, and I'm ready to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker and candidate is Tanya Wu.
Hi, my name is Councilmember Tanya Wu, and I represent you on the Seattle City Council. I was appointed to this position 8 months ago. I was just in Madison Park for their community council meeting with Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, who says hello. I told her I was coming here, and she wanted to make sure that I extend her greetings. But I wanted to talk about why I'm running. I grew up here. I'm a fifth-generation Seattleite. But because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, I'm the first generation born here. I grew up in a family of small business owners. When my family immigrated here, we worked on the railroad. We also owned laundromats and restaurants. If you remember Moon Temple Restaurant on Wallingford, that was my grandparents' restaurant. I grew up there. My parents had the first Chinese bakery in Seattle called Monhei Bakery, and I grew up there serving pastries to my fellow friends and to community members. I'm a small business owner still. My family owns Cow Cow Restaurant in the Chinatown International District. I've also built housing. I built affordable housing, workforce housing, which only charges our tenants a portion of their income, so no one is forced to pay a rent they cannot afford. I'm also a community advocate. About 5 years ago, when our seniors were being pushed to the pavement due to anti-Asian hate, I stood up and organized rallies and was able to help our elders go into the halls of City Hall and county halls to talk about their experience and what they're hoping to see. And so from that experience, I became really involved in public safety. I helped start a community watch group that is very similar to a block watch group. We walked every single day for 4 years, making sure that our businesses, our small businesses felt safe, our residents felt safe, and that people on 12th and Jackson were able to connect to resources. I went inside encampments. I went into places where there are all tents and tried to help connect people to shelter, to housing, and try to meet people's basic needs. And so I have a lot of experience on the ground. I am from community and love my community. I grew up here. I now live in Rainier Beach. And so my 3 priorities: public safety, housing, and affordability. And so these are all things I have experience in. And I know when it comes to public safety, people deserve to be able to go to the grocery store and feel safe. I know many of you walk to QFC. We just recently passed a drug-free zone in this area. And that is a pre-trial conditional release so that people who are selling drugs and causing the most amount of harm to our community will be able to not be able to be in this area. And then in the budget, we are also going to offer resources and funding for groups like LEAD, We Deliver Care, REACH, to be able to do their outreach here. I believe in a balanced public safety policy. Not only should we have fully funded officers, but we should also have the alternatives to policing, which is what my volunteer group does. And I believe the red means I need to wind down. And so I am excited to be here. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Tanya. We will now proceed to the questions and answers. Each will have a minute, and we will alternate who answers the questions first. Tanya will answer the first question, and the question is, to both of you, if you are elected to the City Council Position 8, you will have a citywide constituency. How does this differ from having a district-specific constituency in terms of the challenges of representation?
What a great question. So I believe the challenges we see in one neighborhood, we see in many neighborhoods. They may take a different form, like gentrification and displacement may look different in South Seattle than it does in North Seattle, but they're very similar issues. And being in office for the last 8 months, I've been working really closely with my fellow council members, my colleagues. All of them have endorsed me, except for one, the one I ran against last year. But we have a great relationship, and I find myself supporting many of them. We worked together to pass a lot of legislation these past 8 months to further public safety with soda and soap. We voted for competitive wages for officers. We saw applications come in. We were getting 5 a day, now we're seeing 15 a day, and we're able to hire the best in the region. We expanded care together. We are also working on legislation to build more housing, which is something I have a lot of experience doing. Another thing that I'm working on is a cease and desist for Black homeowners from predatory solicitations, and there is so much more happening. Thank you.
Alexis?
So one of the greatest joys about running citywide is it gives me an excuse to be all across the city, listening to folks and really finding what are the common threads that tie communities together, but what also is distinct and different when we're talking about, walking our streets in Lake City versus Fremont versus West Seattle. And so in many ways, I view the opportunity of being able to run citywide, and this position in particular, to really complement the work of each of the district-specific offices. We know that there's a lot of needs across the city, there's a lot of people to reach, and so making sure that we're bringing balanced perspectives to also district-specific conversations is what I'm really interested in doing. And I've had a lot of experience working in partnership with folks across the board. I used to work for the Sound Cities Association, which represents 38 cities across King County and actually represents all of the elected officials within them. And so my job was to corral and bring those folks together. I have a lot of work doing in bipartisan work, and so I can really focus on making sure that we're centering the problem and centering solutions to make sure that we're acting in service of the people, and that's what I'm focused on bringing forward in position 8.
Thank you. Next question. Alexis, you will answer first. Do you think the mayor's campaign to revitalize downtown has been successful? Why or why not?
I don't know why I keep sitting down. I'm just going to be standing. This is a great question, and I think leads us to focus on what are the key metrics and outcomes that we're looking towards. When we're looking at downtown revitalization, there's some key things that I think come to mind, thinking about how are we reducing violent crime and overdose deaths that we see downtown. And would like to see some of the data on how we're seeing the effects of that. But also thinking about vacant storefronts that we've seen downtown. And it's my understanding we're seeing some of our businesses come back in that. And then it's also the felt presence of each of the streets. Are we seeing a lot of trash? Are we seeing other types of things that could pose a safety risk as well? And so off the bat, I know when I walk downtown, I qualitatively would say it feels a bit different, but I would really want to focus again on having a data-driven conversation. What are the key metrics we want to be looking at to make sure that we are meeting those guidelines? And then, of course, talking to the residents of downtown if they're feeling that change is very felt and different, as well as the businesses that are currently running in downtown.
Thank you. Tanya?
So I have a great relationship with the mayor of Seattle, so I do believe in his downtown reactivation plan. My small business, my restaurant, is a part of downtown, Chinatown International District. So this plan has been in the works for many years, and I was able to go to a lot of the initial planning portions of it. And I am excited about what we're going to be able to see in preparation of FIFA soccer in 2026. We are able to turn a lot of these empty office buildings into housing. We're seeing a lot of small businesses come back into downtown, and we really have to lift and empower these small business owners, because the better our small businesses do, the better our city does. Many of them, the B&O tax, contribute to our general fund. And so I think it's also how do we look at the built environment, reactivation of Westlake Park, and how do we reimagine downtown to be the arts and cultural hub that we so love. I remember as a little kid going to the Christmas tree lighting at Westlake Park, and I remember going to Macy's and spending all day there, and would love to be able to get people to come back to downtown to shop, to eat, to watch a show, and stay and support local businesses.
Thank you. The lack of affordable housing is a significant problem. Current council members will have to pass a new comprehensive land use plan by the end of this year. What is the most important change you would like to see in this plan?
Yes, we have to build more housing, and I have experience doing that. Renovating the Louisa Hotel, which was a historic 1908 building. One of the architects was from Frank Lloyd Wright's studio at the turn of the century, brought his Prairie School style architecture to the Northwest with that building. And so was able to convert it into workforce housing. So I know that even the most expensive projects can afford to have affordable housing. And so when we come and look at the comprehensive plan, how do we do that so that people, our children, our grandchildren can afford to live and work here, and our elders can live and age in place? And so we have to not only look at affordable housing in terms of housing for young people, starter families, our elders, but also how do we save trees? How do we look at gentrification, displacement? And those are all things I have been dealing with my entire life. I went to every single comprehensive plan meeting in the city of Seattle, and implementation is also very important, and I have legislation in the works that once the comprehensive plan passes, we could build that housing.
Alexis?
Hello? Okay. Housing is front of mind for so many in this community. I know I feel it every day as somebody who's worked in affordable housing, work and policy, but also as a renter and a hopeful homeowner someday, as many younger folks in this city. And so having a comprehensive plan that represents an opportunity to keep our community housed and accommodate for our neighbors is tremendously important. So making sure we have a comprehensive plan that has more density across neighborhoods across this city is tremendously important and something I would be prioritizing, while also expanding transit-oriented development. What do we mean by that? More housing near transit hubs so folks are able to easily hop on a bus or light rail in order to get to where they need to go, work, grocery store, school, and what have you. I also would elevate that I really want to prioritize and make sure that we have an anti-displacement strategy within this plan that really highlights how we keep communities rooted within the community they call home and not fuel the pattern of displacement we've had in this city. And would elevate, implementation is just as important. We need investments in affordable housing.
Thank you. Hiring more police has been a council priority, but has met with little success. What actions would you propose to reach an adequate level of staffing for the Seattle Police Department? First, Alexis.
Right. I've taken a look at the mayor's 2022 police hiring and recruitment plan, and while we're continuing to see some of the initial results from that, I think we should keep a clear eye on, how that project goes. But I would emphasize that two things I've really elevated as elements to change would be looking at how we expand education opportunities and enhance accountability within the department in order to meet some of these hiring goals. And what I mean by education, having worked at the University of Washington, I've seen the way we have education partners work with industry when we have workforce needs. There's some examples that we saw in partnership between the state legislature and organizations like Microsoft being able to expand enrollment spaces. And so how do we expand and start growing our own pool of potential hires locally that have the kind of education that we need in order to ensure that they're appropriately serving communities and not perpetuating racial bias in policing? While also ensuring that, good workplaces have a healthy accountability culture as well. I think quality officers is just as important as quality, so making sure that we have accountability measures on the books to ensure that we're addressing culture challenges and bringing and cultivating a healthy workplace at SPD.
Thank you.
I'm the only candidate that supports the mayor plan to fully staff the police department. And I believe, 4 years ago, when we did not actually defund the police, we demoralized the police department and 600 officers left the force. And so this last couple of months and year, I've been doing ride-alongs with West Precinct, North Precinct, South Precinct to really see what our officers are dealing with. and making sure they have the support that they need. And so we've done things where we pass competitive wages to be able to hire the best. We've been getting from 5 to 15 applications a day. We have a program called Before the Badge, which not only helps our officers before they get into the police academy to go into our communities and meet people and get to know people, but it also is a way for us to weed officers out to make sure we're hiring the best and the most compassionate and officers who are able to go into community and talk to people. I think we also not only should we look at officer staffing, but firefighters as well. We are seeing the potential collapse of the paramedic program because not many people are entering firefighting.
Thank you. The City Council has proposed a $1.55 billion transportation levy proposal aimed at creating a safe, reliable, and connected city. The levy plans to fund local sidewalks, transit connections, bridge repair, and modernization projects over the next 8 years. Do you support this levy proposal? Why or why not? Tanya?
So I worked on this levy proposal and I voted for it. I'm on the Transportation Committee. I think this is an amazing once-in-a-lifetime investment and opportunity to build more sidewalks. Also, Vision Zero is something near and dear. I live along Rainier Avenue South, where we see the majority of our traffic deaths. I believe it averages about 15 to 16 a year, and that number has not gotten any better. And so how do we look at our built environment to allow it for it to be safer? I know the School for the Blind is near Rainier Ave, where all these deaths with traffic deaths have been occurring. So really looking at how do we get these deaths down to zero with our built environment. I think it's a big opportunity to not only build sidewalks, work at Vision Zero, but look at neighborhood projects. We all wanted to focus on the basics, on infrastructure, on making sure that our roads are safe, they're well lighted, people can walk to transit stops and go to school without having to worry about being hit by a car. And so I believe this is a good plan, and I hope that you will vote for it on the ballot.
Alexis?
Wonderful. Short and sweet, yes, I will be supporting the transportation levy. It's a tremendously important investment for our basic infrastructure, from roads, bridges, bike infrastructure, safer streets, and so on, as that was mentioned. It funds about a third of Seattle Department of Transportation's department, so really critical for being able to maintain the work moving forward. And I'm, as somebody who relies on our buses to get around, I want to make sure our buses continue to run and we keep that service. There's also some exciting improvements also for bike infrastructure to improve a biking experience and ensure safety for cyclists going through the city. And we all know our roads have some potholes, so want to make sure that we're repairing as many of those as possible as well, and having accessible sidewalks safe for everybody. And lastly, I just elevate, I know much of our city services are funded through levies. We know property levies disproportionately fall are funded in a more regressive way. I'm hopeful that we can pursue more progressive revenue options to further fund our critical city services.
Thank you. The Supreme Court recently ruled that cities can prohibit camping on public property, and the fact that some residents have no other housing options at all does not convert the practice into a cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment. Would you support or oppose similar restrictions on the homeless in Seattle? Alexis?
I support being able to house our neighbors, and we know that housing gets to the heart of addressing the homelessness crisis that we see. So if the law was before us, I would be opposing it, because I do think very first and foremost, it wouldn't solve the underlying problem that we're facing in our community. Too many of our neighbors are unable to afford housing and are struggling on the streets, I'm in favor of first taking steps to make sure that we're doing what we can to create accessible treatment options, create housing opportunities, and fully ensure that we have caseworkers that are working with folks in their pathway to stabilization. That's at the heart of it, and that's what I want to make sure that we're focused on instead of punitive measures that worsen our problems.
So I support Mayor Harrell's plan on encampment resolutions, and this is why. Every person is offered housing and shelter before a resolution, and when the HOPE team goes out to talk to people, we have groups like LEAD and REACH, and We Deliver Care. My volunteer group, we go into encampments. Andrea's group goes into encampments as well to try to connect people to housing and to resources. I believe it's inhumane to let someone die outside. I also been into encampments and seen what happens inside encampments, who does what. Yes, there are people who are in need of resources, but there are also people who are being preyed upon. I've seen the trap tents, I've seen guns, I've seen knives, and it's kind of, I think having people go into encampments and be able to reach people who really need the resources and bring them inside is really important. Building trust is really important, and holding people accountable who are there, that are there to prey on people. And so I believe like we always can use more resources. My Louisa Hotel, my workforce housing building, we housed 20 people who were formerly unhoused. And so I believe not only do we need to build more housing to house people, but public-private partnerships as well.
Thank you. What policy options would you promote to address the threat of climate change? Tanya?
Yeah, so I'm the chair of the Sustainability Committee. So this is something we talk about in committee all the time. We have an amazing Office of Sustainability and Environment that's facing huge budget cuts. We have an amazing Green New Deal program where we're able to build climate resiliency hubs. We are seeing more days that are above 85 degrees here in Seattle. People used to come here as a refuge from climate change, and now we're seeing more hot and cold days. And so we've done some amazing things in committee. We have looked at being able to build more EV chargers throughout the city by subletting electricity. We also have electrified our cruise ship berths, our ports. We're building more of that infrastructure in Seattle, especially working with Seattle City Light, which is also another committee I chair, working together to build more of that green infrastructure. We just passed the Food Action Plan because we want to be able to work with tribes, with different organizations, and to build more pea patches, to bring more fresh fruits to community members. We've done so many things, I could go on and on, but it's really important that in this budget cycle that we fight to retain the funding for the Office of Sustainability.
Alexis?
I love this question because I'm thinking about the climate crisis every day and what, the future of young people really holds for us. The city has a goal of getting carbon neutral by 2050. If I could tell you today how we're doing, I wouldn't know. How are we on track to meeting that goal? So first and foremost, taking steps to actually prepare, where are we currently at in meeting that goal? And then working with partners to actually develop a plan on how we get there. The next piece is the fact that we know that the two biggest sources of our emissions are from vehicles, passenger vehicles, and from buildings. And so taking steps on the emissions front to ensure that we have electrified transit to bring our emissions down, while also working on supporting implementing electric heat pumps into buildings to, again, bring building emissions down. So we're moving away from gas infrastructure. And then also elevating that, the Green New Deal initiatives are fantastic. Unfortunately, we could be investing a lot more in those programs and expanding them, but unfortunately, much of that money is being used to cover the city's budget deficit. And so making sure that we're restoring that funding for its true purpose to fund those Green New Deal initiatives.
Thank you. What actions would you take as a city council member to reduce gun violence in Seattle? Alexis?
Amazing. I really appreciate this question because we often talk about the response to incidents that's happened. And I've said from the beginning that we need a public safety system that has a quick response and a right response for given scenarios. But we also need to be focusing on how we prevent crime from happening in the first place in our communities. And as the only candidate endorsed by the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, I've stood by in this race the need to invest in community violence intervention programming and the importance of partnering with the state legislature in the upcoming session to ensure that we're passing more common sense gun legislation to get guns out of our communities.
So this past week, you might have seen me on TV doing a press conference on trying to put together a stakeholders group on after-hour nightclubs. Nightclubs open from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. 10% of the violent deaths with guns that we're seeing in the city of Seattle happen near these nightclubs. And so we're convening a stakeholder group to come up with recommendations on what we can do to help make these places safer for our young people. And we don't have to worry about seeing another death every single month in front of these nightclubs that have not been operating safely. I believe we need more programming for our young people. I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. My sister was in a gang, Blood and the Crips. My cousins had been shot, many of them were killed. So going through that, I realized how important it is to mentor our young people and make sure that they are engaged in activities of their interest and help with entrepreneurship. So programs where we could extend hours at community centers, late night basketball, apprenticeships and internships, to give our youth the opportunity that we have received.
Thank you. Do you support building more tiny houses or tiny house villages? And if so, where should these villages be located?
So I helped build a tiny house, and there's a place in Soto called the Hope Factory. I believe they could produce 3 tiny houses every single week, and it was just an amazing community building experience. And most people I talk to in the encampments who are outside, they want a tiny house. This is what people are asking for. They want a door where they can feel safe and where their belongings are, where they can bring their pets or their partners and their families. And so I believe we do need to build more tiny houses, and where the city has a lot of surplus land, there is also a lot of land where there are construction projects that are planned to happen. And so I've been reaching out to a couple of people to learn more about the process. It requires infrastructure and a couple of $1,000s to be able to put a tiny home village in certain areas. I know a lot of churches have been amazing in allowing for tiny home villages in their lots. I believe it's a great program and we'll love to see more of them.
Alexis?
At this stage in the homelessness crisis, I'm strongly supportive of creating more indoor spaces where folks can be, so they are outside of the elements. And tiny house villages present a unique model because they do create that bit of dignity by having some space, some ability to close a door, have peace of mind. You're able to bring your dog. Many congregate shelter settings don't allow for some of those things. And so I am supportive of bringing online more tiny house villages, and I've done work alongside organizations that provide that model and have supported working also with churches. Many churches and faith-based places of worship bring those on board to help support their broader community. But the important thing also about tiny house villages is that it's best used as a transitional option into a permanent housing option. And I've known folks who have been living in a tiny house villages for 5 years, waiting to get, into a permanent housing option, ready to move on to that next step, and we just don't have the affordable housing to get folks there. So I'm supportive, but want to recognize the distinct role that they play, and we need more housing.
Thank you. And a final question. Upon what issue do you believe you differ most with your opponent, and why? The first is to Alexis.
I appreciate this question because I think me and my opponent agree on a number of things, but one key way that we differ is related to our position on taxes and addressing the need to fund our city services. I've been very clear from the beginning that Washington has an upside-down tax code. We rely on things like sales tax and property tax to fund many of our things, and we know that the tax burden then falls to many working people in our cities, and we all feel it. But we recognize the critical need to fund city services, things like our libraries, our parks, housing, and so much more, because we know that's what makes our community well. And in this moment of intense need, especially navigating out of the pandemic, our young people need resources and support and investment. We know we need to be building more housing options. We know we need to be investing in recovery options to support folks in recovering. And I've been clear that we need to ensure that we are implementing more progressive taxes to fund those things so we can keep our communities truly safe and well for everybody.
So I think the biggest area that we differ on is also public safety. I'm on the record for voting for competitive wages for officers, expand the care team, for SODA, which is the stay out of drug zone, for SOAP, going after pimps and johns, and making sure that the young ladies who are being exploited have resources. We're putting $2 million in the budget for those resources. I voted for a lot of public safety measures that my opponent has been on the record for saying that she would not have voted for them. I think experience is also key. I'm a small business owner and affordable housing developer. I also provide affordable housing. My opponent worked for the King County Regional Homeless Authority, who authored also the 5-year plan that would have cost the city at first $25 billion and then $12 billion. And so I always ask people, we differ on a lot of things. It's up to you who you believe should be running the city, a small business owner or somebody who worked for the King County Regional Homeless Authority.
Thank you. It is now time for your closing statements, and the first to give the closing statement will be Tanya.
Thank you. So I grew up in the city. I love my city, and I can't imagine living anywhere else. And this is why I'm running, is I want to effect change to make the city better. A lot of things that I have been working on this past 8 months are slow changes. And you'll have to ask yourself, do you feel like the city is in a better place today than we were 8 months ago? I believe we live in a world-class city. We deserve world-class services. We come a long way, but we still have so much more ways to go. And so my office is focused on 3 things: public safety, housing, affordability, and making sure that the King County Regional Homeless Authority is on the right track. We need a regional plan. We just voted on the ILA for the KCRJ to be more effective, basically. I believe that a lot of things that our city deals with, we have to work together with state to get things done. We have to work together as school districts to be able to keep our schools open. And we also have to work with community. So a lot of people ask me, how would I do as a leader? And you could see in what I'm doing when I'm passing legislation, I go to community and I ask for recommendations. And so I'm excited about all the things I'm working on. You'll see in the next couple of months on how we build more housing, on how do we protect and stop gentrification, displacement, how do we help our youth from gun violence. And the budget is where we put our money where our mouth is. So you will see in the next couple of weeks, the next 2 months, we are going to hone down on this document and make sure that our priorities are reflected there. And I'm excited to work on this. I come from a community that is known as the most endangered neighborhood in the nation. I come from a community that's been marginalized and has been vulnerable. And a lot of the policies in the last 4 years has hurt marginalized and vulnerable communities the most. And so I'm working to make changes. I'm working for progress. We cannot go backwards. We cannot double down on the failed policies of the past. We have to make changes. And we have to work together in community to make sure that these changes are what you want.
Thank you. Alexis?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, just to respond to some of the points that were raised, I really have to stand against the intentional misspreading of information. This is something that we've talked about, and I really have been firm to stand against and say, you know, do you want to vote for somebody who intentionally spreads misinformation? We've discussed in these forums before that the plan does not cost billions of dollars. In fact, I don't think the mayor of Seattle, the mayor of Redmond, the mayor of Auburn would have voted for this plan if it committed them to $12 billion. The county executive also supported this plan as well. In fact, it can be done all within KCRHA's existing budget. So I just have to at the top, clarify that point. But the broader point is that, as I hope you'll have heard tonight, that I bring experience and the ability to unify folks across the spectrum, like with that plan, which did get unanimous votes through 2 boards. I got my master's degree at the UW, but I've also worked to unite and bring forward an agreement before our 5 North King County cities, the cities of Shoreline, Bothell, Lake Forest Park, Woodinville, and Kenmore. I united all of them under unanimous votes from those 5 councils to regionalize our response to homelessness. And when do 5 cities unanimously vote on something together? I don't know. And I also established and directed our regions for severe weather, sub-regional severe weather response system to address how our folks may be living outside and how we are making sure we're addressing climate change to ensure we're keeping folks safe. Most recently, I was working at UW's budget office, supporting our academic units, supporting all of the administrative units in their work to ensure that we are balancing priorities across UW's $10 billion budget. And you know, division is everywhere. This is the campaign that is uniting Seattle. This is the campaign that Planned Parenthood Trust will protect a woman's right to choose. This is the campaign that united the entire Democratic Party, with all legislative districts in the city of Seattle choosing to stand by this campaign. And this is the campaign that unionized nurses, machinists, electricians, construction workers stand by because they know we'll fight for working families. Thank you.
Thank you to both of our candidates. I think we can say that we're in pretty good hands no matter who wins. Thank you to both of you for your wonderful presentation. We will start our next forum in just 1 or 2 minutes. Would you all please, if you are able, stand up. Say hello to your neighbor next to you. If you don't know them, introduce yourself, please, and say hello. And we will call you in as soon as we're ready.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Tanya, thank you so very much. Good luck to you. Thank you. It was a wonderful job. Wonderful job. Let's see. Okay, those are all yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a scatterer.
Okay, that's all. I
I
want to make sure she didn't leave anything behind. Fine. Okay.
And then hold it like an ice cream.
Okay. I don't like drinking water at these things anyway, but I appreciate you.
I dress down, you dress down. And then hold it like. Should I just leave it on for the timer? Either or. Yeah, I mean your nails.
Okay.
We couldn't figure out the color. We figured it out.
Is she explained the mic to you?
So,
Okay, good. Push it up and then works. Good.
So give it. Don't just turn it on and then put it right in your mouth. Give it a second. We have time for about 3 minutes.
Having such a good time, it's hard to bring them back together.
Well, that's good. I'm going to call them back together.
If you will take your seats, we'll get started on the next forum. You may carry on your conversations after the forum, or tomorrow, or the next day. This forum brings to us the two candidates for the Legislative District House of Representatives, the 43rd District. They will replace the long-term incumbent, Frank Chop, who has chosen not to run this time. So we do not have an incumbent in this position, and this is our legislative district. The candidates are Sean Scott on my left and Andrea Suarez on my right. Both are labeled Democrats. We will commence with the opening statements, and the first to speak will be Andrea.
Hello, am I live? Thanks for having me back. My name is Andrea Suarez. I'm a Democrat, a twice elected Democrat for the 43rd Legislative District as your precinct committee officer. I've lived in Belltown for 15 years and in the county for half my life. I am a grassroots leader for an organization called We Heart Seattle, a nonpartisan movement for a more beautiful and safe Seattle for all to enjoy. I love Seattle so much, I named my organization We Heart Seattle. And that stood for not just saying and theorizing and looking to data that's typically flawed, but to action. I'm short on talk and long in action. In fact, me and my volunteers have organized more than 400 litter picks, cleaning more than 1.5 million pounds of trash from our green belts, from underneath the highway, preventing fires, preventing death, preventing crime. I am a public safety candidate endorsed by the Seattle Times, endorsed by our police officers, endorsed by our first responders, endorsed by our trade unions, supported by every member of our city council except for one. I am a strong Democrat raised by both a Republican and a Democrat. We got along. I talked to all sides. I'm not a ride or die on every position point of my party. I am a listener. I love diversity of thought and debate, and that's what makes for better outcomes. We need new leadership in Olympia. Sean will talk about being endorsed by Frank Chop and Nicole Macri, and thank you for your service. But we need new leadership to address the humanitarian, environmental, and public safety crisis facing the state of Washington. We need new leadership. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, Sean?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's great to be back here at Horizon House. Voters in the August primary, I think, spoke pretty loudly about how they felt in the 43rd Legislative District about this race. Consequently, as a result of us winning with nearly 60% of the vote share, and I think Andrea came in at somewhere around 20, we haven't had the opportunity to talk to a lot of voters because I think there have been a lot of organizations that have sensed that this race is over, and it's absolutely not. So when we have groups like this, Horizon House, the few forums that we've had the opportunity to do, it really does enrich, I think, the democratic process generally. Andrea is absolutely right. I am going to talk about the fact that we've been endorsed in this race by Frank Chop, who was a 30-year incumbent. My predecessor in the seat has been a tremendous mentor and a friend. Also been endorsed by Representative Nicole Macri, who would be my seatmate in Olympia. We're happy to have the support of the actual 43rd Legislative District Democrats. Proud to be supported in this race as well by Planned Parenthood, by the Washington State Council of Firefighters, and actually by the Mayor of Seattle as well. So this is a very important race where we're trying to fight for what it would mean to have a better Washington that's going to be a more fair Washington, where we are building the housing that we need, advancing labor rights. It's going to be a more inclusive Washington where we keep our schools open. I've been spending a good many evenings over the last couple of weeks rallying with parents that are aggrieved over the school closures, parents, students, and educators, I should say. Disappointed to not see you at some of those rallies and also at the Tops K8 Community Forum the other night, Andrea. But that's a big difference in this race. It's about who's going to be rooted in wanting to see the institutions that we care about fully funded in Olympia, We've talked about a sustainable Washington. I know we'll probably have some conversation about sustainability as well. And accessibility is a huge campaign plank for us as well. We want to see our transit stations brought into compliance with federal disability law. So what I believe I bring to this race and to this campaign and hopefully to Olympia is going to be a combination of inside-outside experience. I'm somebody who's been an organizer, somebody who has worked as a lobbyist for Solid Ground, an organization that Representative Chop founded 50 years ago. But I've also been building relationships on the inside as well. Proud to be endorsed by close to 24 sitting lawmakers that have supported my campaign as a result of our policy priorities, the broad base of support that we're bringing to the table in Olympia, and hopefully pushing Olympia to be more responsive to the needs of everyday and working people throughout the state of Washington.
Thank you. I'll ask you now to imagine you have been elected. What is the single most important issue you would like to correct by authoring or adding your signature to a piece of legislation? Please be specific, if you will. Sean.
Well, none of the issues that we care about as Washingtonians are going to be solvable without addressing the tremendous amounts of wealth inequality that we have in our state. I don't believe that it is right that we have some of the wealthiest individuals and corporations in human history at the same time that we have people sleeping on the street, schools getting ready to close, childcare being increasingly unaffordable, retirees worried about whether or not their pensions are going to lose value over time, educators worried about pay, and working people and renters in my district worried about the cost of housing. So I would have to say unequivocally, the number one issue that is going to be facing our state is going to be wealth inequality. I would love to be able to help close that gap with progressive revenue. Have been a proud member of the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition for the last 4 years in my day job capacity with Solid Ground. So as progressives, as a very, very democratic, very blue district, it's going to be about making sure that we're enacting the revenue that we need to fund the services that we use, from education to transit to affordable housing. Excuse me.
Andrea?
Hello? Is this on? Okay. I couldn't be more different than Sean Scott. The number one priority for me is public safety. No well-intended progressive policy can be realized without the bedrock of public safety. And so as your legislator, I will make sure that our officers are recruited and paid and bonused well. We need an HR manager, a recruitment. In private sector where I come from, we would pay people commission to recruit the best of the best. I don't want it to be easy to be a cop in Seattle. I want to be the most prestigious, most accountable, most trained, most difficult program to get into, much like an Ivy League school for public safety. So I don't necessarily disagree with Sean. We cannot have all of these great progressive values without public safety. And for that would be my number one priority as your legislator.
Thank you. The next three questions could be answered with a simple yes or no. However, it is important for us to understand the reasons for your positions. So the first one, Andrea will answer first. What is your position on the initiative to prohibit carbon tax credit trading and to repeal the provisions of the 2021 Washington Climate Commitment Act, a state law that provides for cap and invest programs designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050?
As a person who's picked up more than 1.5 million pounds of trash, including tires, propane tanks, hazardous waste, needles, bodies, thinking about the Climate Commitment Act feels like a pie in the sky. I will be voting no on the initiative. However, as your legislator, I'm going to hold those dollars very accountable to make sure we have better outcomes on where this tax is going. We need to have transparency and accountability. I would rather put that type of money into education on how we can, in everyday lives, help the climate, like insulating our homes and choose when we do laundry or our dishes or heat our home. There are areas that we can make immediate difference, though I will be voting no on that initiative. Thank you.
Sean?
Well, I'll be voting no on any attempt to repeal the few sources of progressive revenue that we have in Olympia, including an attempted Republican repeal of the Climate Commitment Act. Here, I do believe it is important to listen to not just what the candidates are saying about themselves, but what others who study these issues have said about the candidates. Seattle Subway, the Transit Writers Union, Washington Conservation Action, the Urbanist, the Environmental Council of the State of Washington Democratic Party have all taken a look at both of our plans for climate. Andrea, I don't believe that you have earned a single one of those endorsements, and it's because they've heard what you have to say about the Climate Commitment Act, and they disagree. They think that when you have somebody that's talking about scrutinizing the public funds that we're devoting towards climate action, that sounds a lot like austerity politics, and it sounds a lot like what some members of the GOP say federally about holding big government accountable, when really what government is supposed to be doing is making the lives of everyday people better. I can't think of a better way for Washington to be spending its public dollars than on transit projects. So I will proudly be voting no on any attempt to repeal the Climate Commitment Act.
Thank you. The next one is, what is your position on the initiative to allow employees and self-employed individuals to opt out of paying the tax and receiving the benefits under the Washington Cares, the state long-term services and support trust health care program?
Now is not the time for us to be divesting from caretaking. All of us come into the world needing care. Most of us at some point in time during our lives are going to require some kind of caretaking. And if we're lucky, we leave this world surrounded by people who love us and care about us as well. So I believe that one of the best commitments that the state of Washington can be making right now to people of all ages, of all backgrounds, is in making sure that we're making caretaking a well-resourced industry, if you will. So I will be voting no as well on any attempt to repeal the gains that we have made with the WACARES program. And we'll also want to make sure that when we get to Olympia, and I say we because it's not just one legislator, but it's the coalition that you take to Olympia with you. One of the things I hear over and over again, cost of childcare, elder care, caretaking, the wages in those fields are much too low to attract people into those fields to deliver the kinds of work or services that we all need to see. So we want to build on the WACARES Act at the same time that we fight a Republican attempted repeal of it.
Thank you.
Sean likes to start out by saying who he is endorsed by. I am your candidate that wants to flip Washington upside down and take a new path, a new set of leadership in a direction for a more safe, beautiful, accessible Washington. I'm glad that I am not endorsed by this establishment he keeps referring to, because I feel failed as a Democrat. I shouldn't feel fringe as a moderate, centrist Democrat who wants accountability for our tax dollars, who wants transparency and accountability. I'm a bleeding heart bean counter, and I am starting to question some of these initiatives. I'm undecided on this one. I'm hearing that there's not a lot of money at the end of the rainbow. And for that, I'm going to continue to learn and debate and make sure that all of you are represented in that ultimate outcome if I'm elected.
Thank you. What is your position on the initiative to repeal the capital gains excise tax imposed on long-term capital gains by individuals with gains exceeding $250,000? First, Andrea.
We've both been asked this question many times on the campaign trail, and again, the state of Washington has been very healthy over the last several years, having an increase in tax revenue that we were not expecting on a variety of ways. And so I'm about accountability and transparency of the money that we are bringing into the state. I will vote no on this initiative, but again, where will this money go? Will it be accountable and transparent for all? And I will be your watchdog in Olympia, because I want to make sure that if we're going to tax our friends and colleagues, we want to make sure that that money is going to great causes and with great outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, having been I'm going to vote no on any attempted repeal that is funded by a Republican billionaire by the name of Brian Haywood. We don't need to see a repeal of a capital gains tax that is right now going to be funding education, that's going to be funding childcare. When we have the conversation about taxes, we are having a conversation about services, which is a conversation about values. Do you believe that only people who make enough money should be able to send their kids to quality public school? Do you believe that only working families with very, very, very high-paying jobs should be able to afford childcare? Do you believe that we shouldn't have fully funded mass transit? If the answer to those questions is yes, I would say that we need to have a values check on what exactly it is your priorities might be. But those are the stakes that we have to understand. When we repeal a capital gains tax, we're talking about rolling back services that people all depend on. And in a broader sense, we're talking about turning the clock back to, I think, a very dark period in our country's history where only the wealthy, only the very powerful, only the very potent could afford to stay alive and be healthy. I don't want to take us backwards in that way. I want us to go forward, so I would be opposing the repeal of the capital gains tax.
Thank you. Further on the capital gains tax, assume it passes. What source of revenue would you support to replace the funds that it currently provides for school construction, child care? Sean?
So this is I think a race where we see a pretty big disparity of experience, where in the last 4 years in Olympia, we have been talking about progressive revenue options, testifying for in front of the Finance Committee for various forms of progressive revenue that could be a stopgap against the repeal of our capital gains tax. Andrea, you weren't present for any of those discussions, so it's going to be hard for me to believe personally as a potential constituent of yours that you're going to follow up on standing up for those issues because you weren't present as they were debated over the last 4 years. What we need to see is an expansion of our B&O surcharge tax is one potential form of progressive revenue. We would also like to see what it would look like to litigate the capital gains tax and see on what basis it was repealed, if that would stand up in court, which I do not believe that it would. And members of the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition and our partners in the Economic Opportunity Institute have compiled sort of a menu of progressive taxes that we're going to have to get really serious about weeding through. That's experience that I bring to the table, making sure our education and our housing choices are fully funded, and I want to bring that experience to Olympia as well.
Andrea?
You're right. I have not been in Olympia for the last 4 years. I have been busting my tail, boots on the ground, in the field, helping hundreds of people out of the woods, out from underneath the highways, out from underneath poverty, despair, and addiction, into treatment, back to family. And I'm here to learn what that experience will be in Olympia if you elect me. But what I bring is practical, boots on the ground experience. Believe me, if I'm elected, there will be a conversation about surplus, because that's how I run We Heart Seattle. We run efficiently, and we run on a dime, and we run with volunteers, and through civic engagement, we get things done on a dime. And so I'm a candidate. Again, I'm a bleeding heart bean counter, and sorry I haven't been in Olympia, but I've been cleaning up your city. Every zip code has been served, every park, every green belt, and I am a policy expert when it comes to addressing the humanitarian, public safety, and addiction crisis facing our city through action, not through theory.
Thank you. Let's turn to a different state area, transportation. On behalf of your Seattle constituents, which priorities would you lobby for when the next Department of Transportation budget is developed? Public safety, road maintenance, public transportation, state ferries? What do you consider to be the greatest need for the State Department of Transportation dollars? Andrea.
My wheelhouse. Sorry, I'm going to go back to my wheelhouse, which is whatever we talk about in Olympia cannot be realized without public safety as our bedrock. Without public safety as our bedrock, people will not take the bus. I live in Belltown. I'm downtown. I see empty buses. I see empty transit. I see empty sidewalks. People will not come downtown. Grandchildren will not come downtown, which is frankly why I founded We Heart Seattle, when a grandfather told me that his children will not come down to Bell Street Park because there were needles everywhere. So all of these ideas around transportation and building it out and investing in the infrastructure that we do need in the state of Washington cannot be realized without, first and foremost, addressing public safety and the drug epidemic that's crushing and massacring our communities. Our businesses, our residences, and our human beings are dying at an entire airplane per day in the United States from drug overdose. So I have a hard time talking about pretty much anything else right now until we get that figured out.
Sean?
Right. Well, we're right now seeing environmental calamity at a scale that I believe many of us thought would be not possible in the state of Washington, in our country as a whole. The heartbreaking images that we've seen over the last several days coming from North Carolina, understanding that it's really only a matter of time before rising sea levels of that kind are seen on the West Coast as well. So we want to be doing everything that we can with respect to climate mitigation and climate adaptation, and I think a big part of that is going to have to involve investing in our mass transit system, making it a system that people want to ride. Building more affordable housing is going to help to reduce those carbon emissions as well. Housing is a climate solution, but with respect to the heart of the question that you asked, I would have to say of the four, I think it was policy potential priorities that you mentioned, I would have to say mass transit would be near the top, probably at the top for me.
Thank you. What would you do as a state legislator to combat the fentanyl crisis in this state? Sean?
So what we're seeing with respect to fentanyl, what we're seeing with respect to people who are, especially our houseless population that is in desperate need of more services, we want to be able to fund and scale up organizations that are using housing as a means to connect people to services. The state of Washington, I think, has to fund three kinds of programs generally. The first is substantive outreach, where we're having folks who are actually building strong relationships with people over time, figuring out what specifically their needs are, if those needs might involve recovery and addiction services. The second component of it is housing. Very, very difficult to get clean, very difficult to get away from sort of the throes of addiction if there is not a stable housing arrangement involved. And the third part of it, and this is where I think we could actually be standing to do much better in the state of Washington, is aftercare. After we've built relationships and after we've connected people to housing, tracking people through our systems that we establish, making sure that they have job retraining, financial literacy services if needed, and as well helping them on their road to recovery as well. So it's those three silos of policies that I would like to see the state of Washington more fully fund, and I know that my endorsees at the King County Council, through which a lot of our behavioral health dollars flow, would agree with that assessment as well.
Fentanyl overdoses and the fentanyl epidemic is my wheelhouse. I've been out on the ground for 4 years meeting addicts who tell me that they need love and they need leverage. They need to be held accountable. They need consequences in order for them to change the stage they're in from pre-contemplative to contemplative. This is about having models that work. I've co-founded North America Recovers with thousands of people in recovery who've shared stories with me that it was about being held accountable for their behavior. That means arrest. Arrest doesn't mean incarcerate forever. It means stop and address your behavioral issues. It's rooted in addiction. So then let's go to treatment. And we have a beautiful program in the state of Washington, thanks to Lauren Davis in 2018 passed Ricky's Law. So we have a program where people can be taken in voluntarily to Wenatchee, Kent, and Chehalis in a facility where they can get well. And we need to expand those types of programs. Take note, my opponent has not yet said the words public safety in today's forum.
Thank you. We need thousands of additional homes for the currently homeless, as well as for our growing population. the number of housing units, especially for middle and low income, has to be increased. Can we become more efficient in creating more homes with housing funds already allocated from the state? Or must additional funds, state funds, be developed and directed toward that? Our first responder is Andrea.
We have a strong economy in the state of Washington, and we need to better formalize how we spend our money. We need to cut the red tape and cut through the bureaucracy, much like the work I'm in. I've seen firsthand money squandered on the rinse and repeat failed policies of Housing First, and how meeting people where they're at and waiting for people to be ready until they may even or not go inside. I've attempted to house hundreds of people who abandon their homes, who abandon treatment, who go back home and abandon their families because of addiction. So until we address those root causes, we have to bifurcate who we're housing, Ned. Affordable housing all day long. We need to cut the red tape, reformulate the condominium liability laws so we can bring back first-time home buyers again, access programs like the McKinney Center and Fresh Start programs where people fresh out of incarceration are given the school skills to buy a home. Sean has this common denominator of, you know, everybody like chopping them off at the legs rather than giving them a stool up.
We were endorsed by Frank Chop, which I think is what you were trying to say there. So what we need to see in the state of Washington right now is a much greater investment in public and social housing. I was actually proud to work with Representative Chop on passing House Bill 1474, which was a bill that passed in the 2023 legislative session that expanded, or that actually created a housing assistance, a home buyer's assistance account for first-time Black and brown homeowners. I'm very proud of that work. I've also been supported in this race by Representative April Berg as a result of our shared commitment to seeing a real estate excise tax pass in an upcoming legislative session, which will close to double our investments that we're making in affordable housing in the state of Washington. As it is right now, most of the spending that we do on affordable housing flows through the Housing Trust Fund, which my predecessor created. Very important program. We want to build on that with a real estate excise tax that's going to create a lot more housing options, a lot more not-for-profit housing, the kinds of housing that everyday people depend on and want to see from a state like ours.
Thank you. Would you support or oppose legislation to limit the percentage of annual residential rent increases, and why? Sean?
Absolutely. Well, in the 43rd Legislative District, we are over 70% renter. We are a renter majority state in the state of Washington. When I am talking to voters at the Capitol Hill Farmers Market at the doors, the other day we actually launched a canvass from Montlake. A good many homeowners there as well are talking about the affordability pinch and what that's doing to people in particular who rent. So I would definitely want to make sure that the work that the Washington State House of Representatives did to get the rent stabilization bill close to passing is built upon in the next session, so we can help to persuade some of our colleagues in the Senate who might not see it the same way as we do around rent increases. But this is a huge issue and a very big legislative priority of mine. The cost of housing, number one, what we can do to make sure that working people and renters in specific know that they have a partner and a champion in the 43rd LD seat for renters, because I am one, and I understand the struggles of renters, what we need to see to cap move-in fees, cap rent stabilization, or cap rent increases, excuse me. Those are all going to be important measures for us to take, and I want to make sure that we take those steps in Olympia.
Andrea?
I believe in rent stabilization through increasing supply. There was a tsunami of tenant right laws that were passed during the pandemic that depleted supply. For example, owner-occupied rental units. I used to be a landlord where I rented out my downstairs basement. Sean's plan to cap rent at a 3% increase simply reduces supply, because now I would VRBO that unit as an example. Just very simple. The math doesn't make sense. It's proven worldwide that rent caps don't work. Look at New York, look at San Francisco. It's a failed policy. What I think Sean's really going after is to eliminate landlords and put the control into the hands of the state. And that's not what I'm about.
Final question. The Washington state tax system was ranked as the most regressive until the capital gains tax went into effect. Now it's second only to Florida. A regressive tax system means that the lower income people pay a higher percentage of their income to taxes than the higher income persons. What should Washington state do to make its tax system less regressive? Andrea?
Bring Amazon employees back to work and have them spend their money at small businesses, at cafes, pay to park. I think that's a great direction. Our president of the city council has also brought our champion bringing people back to work, and so I think that's a great way to increase sales, to increase tax in the state of Washington, making this city safe and desirable for people to tour and come from all over the world. And we live in the most beautiful corner of the world, and when we make it safe, accessible, we then increase our tax revenue in that way. And I'm a big proponent of tax revenue in that way, and use the tax money that we have more efficiently, more transparently, and more in a more accountable way.
Sean?
Right. So it is true what you said, Ned, about us being number 49 with respect to tax fairness. And as a Seahawks fan, that number doesn't really sit too well with me. So I want to see our state become actually much more fair. One of the things that we can do is heed the recommendations of the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition, which has called for ending tax deferments, number one. We have a number of sort of tax loopholes that would not require us actually to enact new legislation. Taxes on major corporations, very, very wealthy individuals, but would require us to just go back and sort of revisit past exemptions that have been made. Around data centers, there's one that would bring in around $123 million a year annually if we were to close the tax loophole that big tech data centers currently enjoy. That's money that would go to our schools. That's a funding source that we could use to keep schools open and keep them from closing. So at the same time that we're keeping our eyes on the prize of a big wealth tax, which constitutionally there are limitations around, we want to make sure that we're sort of going after some of the lower hanging fruit that will sort of enable us to address the issue of tax unfairness tactically, while we're sort of waging that bigger battle or bigger fight for broader economic justice in the form of a wealth tax in our state.
Thank you, and thank you for both observing the time limits. We appreciate that very much. It's now time for our closing statements, and the first one will be given by Sean.
Well, absolutely. It's been great to be with you, Ned, Andrea, as well. This is a conversation and I think a race about three things that I think are pretty actually simple to boil down. It's about vision. What would our candidates like to see? What kind of a vision are we articulating for our state? It's going to be about values. What are the experiences that we bring to the table as candidates? And frankly, it's about who vouches for us as well, because a lot of candidates can sound very well, but if you're not going to Olympia with a coalition of folks that are going to help you realize those ideas, it's for naught. So with respect to our vision in this campaign, I believe that Washington can be a state where the services that we all use are well funded, where our schools stay open, where we have transit stations that are compliant with ADA law, a state where we're advancing labor rights. Those values come out of the fact that I come from a working family. My two parents actually met one another as unionized nurses in the 1970s in New York City. I carry those values as a working person, a child of public schools, a proud Husky, a graduate of the University of Washington with me wherever I go. And it turns out that has been a winning coalition so far. Many were surprised, I think, that our win share was as wide as it was in the primary. We were not, because we had been talking to voters all along throughout our district in Fremont and Wallingford, talking to voters in Montlake and Portage Bay, and we've remained consistent on the idea that a better Washington is a more fair Washington where we're funding the services that we use. We look forward to getting another win in November with your support on the basis of that support for public programs and for doing everything that we can to increase prosperity among everyday people. And it's been an honor to be here with you. And this visitor that has been sent my way gratuitously. There you go.
Did you get him? And
Hanging out.
Thank you for having me back again. My name is Andrea Suarez. I'm a grassroots leader of an organization called We Heart Seattle. I love this city so dearly. I want to take my working model statewide for a more beautiful and safe Washington for all to enjoy. Again, I've housed hundreds of people accessing treatment, reunification to family, boots on the ground in the greenbelts, removing trash, propane tanks, tires. Grimly, I have found 12 bodies in the woods. You have to ask what is working and what's not. I'm a Democrat. And Sean has been quoted in the Seattle Times as saying, the rate of legislative change was moving much quicker when there were cop cars on fire in this city. He condones political violence. He was quoted in Crosscut in 2020, the time for police abolition was yesterday. The time for police abolition is now. He has not said public safety once today. I have the support of the first responders, our officers, our firefighters, our outreach workers, most importantly, the folks suffering outside that are being failed by the Democratic Party. And I am a Democrat, a twice elected PCO officer in the 43rd. And no, I'm not very active in that group because they want to defund the police. They want me to sign resolutions for things that are happening across the world. I care about what's happening right here, right now, incrementally. What can we do in the state of Washington? I appreciate Sean's vision. He's a great storyteller, a videographer, a thespian, but I am a doer. If you want a doer, vote for Andrea Suarez. If you want a thinker, vote for Sean Scott.
thank you for this wonderful forum and debate. We appreciate not only your attendance, but your speaking, and even further, your willingness to run for office. Our system depends upon candidates as well as people who serve. So thank you to both of you for being here and for your wonderful presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to May.
I think there's a stray glass of water.
Okay. That's all right.
Well, it takes a lot of people to put on a forum like this, and I want to thank a lot of you. Certainly Ned for doing a wonderful job as our moderator. I want to thank our timekeepers. They do it time and time again, and they keep this going, so we will get out on time. Thank you so much, Doris, for your leadership and choosing all those questions. They're always very thoughtful, not easy to answer, and those are the kinds of questions that we want our candidates to have to deal with. Thank you also to all of you for coming. I do believe that this way we'll have a much more informed audience, and we'll go to the polls knowing a lot more about the candidates than we did before. We have one more election forum before the conclusion of them, and that'll be a week from today. And there you'll get the pros and cons. You'll hear about the capital gains tax. You heard a little bit about that tonight, as well as the long-term care. The manager of that forum is Laura Weese. We hope that she'll be well enough to be here. And you can see that these, if you can't make it to this room next week, you can also see it on HHTV, and it'll be repeated on YouTube. So thank you very much for coming. Good night.